here. Today we are going to be prepping up our Super Bowl spread. So I'm going to be making my famous chili. We're going to do wings in a couple different ways, a bunch of different little dips and some honey cornbread, and our charcuterie and stuff like that. So let's start by getting everything ready for our chili. My chili, I will tell you, one of my friends calls it like the $1 million chili because I use a lot of different cuts of meat in it. So we'll have bacon, pork tenderloin, chorizo, ground beef, chuck roast, and ground pork. And that kind of makes the meaty filling. And then I've got kidney beans, cannellini beans, black beans, and pinto beans. So lots of different beans that go in it. And then we'll have peppers, onions, tomatoes, and all of that deliciousness as well. And then spices. So let's start. And we're going to start by getting our bacon in here and sizzling up because that kind of gives it a nice bacony grease to cook everything in, which makes it wonderful. So I will say it is a big pot of chili. So I've got my huge, this is what I call my chili pot because you need a big pot for this. And I have tried to make this batch smaller, but I can't. And I think it's because I use so many different cuts of meat and so many different beans that you need a lot. But everyone loves it. This is one that I make it and I give it out to like everybody. Because this is the one that there is leftovers. So I give it to my brothers, my friends. And so such a good chili. We're gonna but the trick is, again, it's using just, the different cuts of meat really gives you both the ground meat and those chunks that just make it really, really lovely. Here. And we'll get it in here, little snips, and we'll let this kind of crisp up and render down. Then we will prep up our meat and then our veggies and kind of put everything together. This is like a stew. So the chili, the longer it sits, the better. So this is one that you can really prep up way beforehand, and it just gets better with age because those flavors really blend well. And it's one of those things that the ingredients all come together nicely on it. So it's not one that you have to be rushing for perfection right before the Super Bowl starts. Okay, looks like we've got our bacon here snipped up fairly well. I'm going to go wash my hands and get that going. Okay, let's get our Dutch oven on. And what we'll do is we will prep up our cuts of meat. The ground beef is what I kind of put in last, or the ground beef, the chorizo, and the pork. So we're going to dice up our chuck roast and our pork tenderloin. I try to aim for about a pound of meat of each one. This is about 1.5 pounds of chuck roast, but it's kind of hard to get a smaller one, and that's fine. This is the best part. Everybody loves to kind of pick out the meat and everything like that. And you always have a little bit of fat that you want to trim off of your roast too. But we'll get this prepped up. Again, any bits of fat, of course, you want to trim off because in your stew, they're not going to render down. They'll just be rubbery because we're not roasting it at a high temperature. There we go. Now, I make my chili more on the mild side because I don't like it super spicy, but you can definitely add in more spices to bring in the heat a little bit more. But with the little kids and my love for more mild things, I keep it pretty mild. Okay, we almost got that fat kind of trimmed off on this. Now, chuck roast is a nice tender piece of meat, but it does have a lot of marbling in it. So you do want to trim it off. You could always sub in stew meat for this if you want, which sometimes you get chuck roast. You get lots of different cuts with the stew meat. But chuck roast, again, is my favorite because it's very tender. Just putting all my fat scraps to the side. This one happens to be a slightly fattier cut, but no worries on it. And then here, I will say this recipe of mine, gosh, I don't even know how long I've been making it. I feel like it's like close to 20 years. I've been making this. This is how I've kind of evolved it over the time to make it. I don't even know how it came to me to, branch off and use so many different cuts of meat, but I think that's like the winning piece is just having, not just ground, but the chunks of it and the different flavor profiles. It just works really well.
You were making this when we met in college.
I know I was. So back in like 2008. So I've been making this for a while. That's going on 20 years. And I know I was making it before that. I think I started making it when I was in high school. I remember I took over it one year. My mom used to always make chili. And I was like, I'm going to do it because I always took over. I started taking over making, the family dinners. And one year I was like, let me do the chili. That I just kind of tweaked it to make it more of the way I like it, and less of the way my mom likes it.
What kind of meat is that?
This is a chuck roast. So we're trimming off the bits of fat, and it has some marbling. The marbling is fine. It's just the big white chunks that you want to cut off. We're going to cut it into smaller bite-sized pieces. You don't want to have any chunk of meat super big in your chili because, again, you want just lots of little pieces throughout. Now, a lot of times, if I buy bigger cuts of meat, I'll divide it in half, and then there's a soup I also make at the same, with the same ingredients, very similar, like with the pork tenderloin and the chuck roast. It's called Soup of the Bacony Outlaws, and it's this lovely Hungarian soup, and it is so delicious. It was featured in like the Fine Cooking magazine in like, I want to say like 2002 or something like that, but it is one of my favorite soups to this day. Here, we'll get this kind of cubed up. Then we'll give our bacon a little bit of a, stir. Now I'm using pork tenderloin, but you can also use like a butt roast or, other kind of a picnic roast and just kind of cube it up if you have that for it. You just really just want a nice kind of big chunky piece of meat. Yeah. And I have experimented. I mean, I did bison one year. I've done ham in it, but kind of put it down to these are my like favorite cuts of meat in here. And let's get these guys cubed up. And I will say it's worth the prep because once you get all these little ingredients cut up and it's stewing, and it's just one of those things that it just the longer it stews, the better. It's you prep it and you put it together, and then you can just sit and relax. Okay, let me put this down for a second. I will say this is a good one that also freezes down really well. So a lot of times we'll make big batches and then we'll freeze it down, and then you can kind of reheat it, later on. Because again, it is hard to make a small batch of this. Here. We got our bacon here. We're going to cook it up and kind of let it render down. Grab a spoon rest. Okay, got my pork. Let's get my tenderloin. And this is the last of the meat we kind of have to trim up. Again, I have about a pound of each. With the pork tenderloin, it's a little bit nicer than the chuck roast in the fact that you don't have to trim off as much fat. There's very little fat on the tenderloin. And it's a good kind of tender piece of meat. We'll slide that over. And we'll get this kind of cubed up. It's a little bit more tender of a meat. I will say this is one of the dishes where a meat cleaver really does make the difference. Anytime I have to cut up like big chunks of meat, it works much better than a smaller knife. It's just very effortless to kind of cut through it. And I used to think, is there really a difference between it? And then when I finally got my cleaver, and it was kind of crazy. I didn't even buy it. I used my bank rewards. You know how you get little rewards? And it was like one of the things back in the day you could get with it. And I was like, we'll get it. And it was probably one of my best little reward purchases. I've had it for a while now.
12 years.
12 years, something like that. And it works really well. But it was always one of those, do you really need it? And I said, if you do a lot of meat prep. Now, if you don't do a lot of meat prep, then no, it's not. It's not worth it. But if you cut up a lot of meat, it is. There we go. And get these guys. And again, smaller little bite-sized pieces just work out a little bit better than the bigger chunks, simply because they'll get tender faster, they soak up more flavor, and that way you can get a little more in every bite, which is kind of my motto when it comes to soup and dicing up vegetables. The smaller the better, just because you can have a bit of everything in every bite. Here. And just a few more left. And at least we're done with this part. Here we go. And this is our pork tenderloin now diced up. So we've got our chuck roast diced up, our pork tenderloin, our bacon is cooking off. Once we have our bacon kind of rendered down, a nice and good of crispy bit, then we'll throw in our meats to kind of get those prepped. And then our ground meats last. Now the ground meats I have are pork, beef, and chorizo. The chorizo I like. Now chorizo, I'm not a big fan of most of the time when it's straight up, but in my chili, I love it because it is in almost like a chili oil type base. So it has this different type of heat to it and spice that I find adds a really unique flavor to the chili. Yeah. Good. We'll get that prepped right there. Let that steam off just a little bit there. And while we're waiting, grab this cutting board out and we'll prep up some of our onions to go in there for this. So I'll use up a little bit of this and dice it up. Nice smaller chunks so that it will be nice and little bits in there. I don't like any of my vegetables to be too big either. And then we'll use some fresh garlic. I do have some regular like sweet peppers, and then you can use jalapeno peppers. I grabbed a serrano pepper, which is a bit spicier than a jalapeno pepper, but I'm not going to use very, very much. I'm going to use a little bit of it, and it should go a long way. That way I can mince it up and put it out there on there. But they were on sale, and the jalapenos just weren't looking great at the store, so I was like, we'll do it a little bit more spicy, but will work. So a good amount of onions. Here right now I've got about 1.5 going on here, and I will probably use one more onion for this because that onion is going to give this really great flavor. Looks like something fell in our laundry room. It was me stacking all of my kids' the teacher and me, I do little activities with the kids. And so I have little boxes that I made with their name on. And this morning I had Teddy practice his like cutting skills and his name. And so he made a heart man because Valentine's Day is coming up. I think I actually put it on the, let's see if I have it on the refrigerator. He was very, very proud of this. This was something I always did on there, but he made this, and this is his heart man. So he had to cut out the heart, he had to cut out the legs, cut out the little hearts, which were very difficult. And then he drew his little face on it. But that was his little activity today on there. But I obviously did not put anything back. Okay. It looks like our bacon is getting pretty well. Make sure your bacon gets to the semi-crispy stage. If you put your other ingredients in before it has a chance to kind of get crispy, it will be more of a chewy, soft bacon in your chili. And you want it to have a little bit of a texture and a little bit more crisp up. So don't rush it, I will say. You know, that is one thing I've learned, that is bacon, if once you start putting other things in, it's not going to crisp up anymore. Let's do one more onion in here. And I think with this meal, I think one thing that makes it also so delicious is you have that bacon grease in there. You have these like meat juices from all the different cuts that add this really richness to the base of the chili. And again, it is so delicious. It has won several chili cooking contests. It won every year. Back when I was teaching, it won every year, to the point where one year a couple of my coworkers were like, do you have to enter in? And I was like, I mean, I'll make it, but I won't enter in, because it was always a hit. I'm like, I'll let you guys have a chance. I was like, I can bring something sweet instead. But they're like, no, we want your chili. We just don't want you to enter in because we know it's already going to win. It's one of those just really, I think it's because it has the different cuts of meat in there. My brother asked me to make it for his chili competition at work, and it won. And then my other brother and my half brother, they entered in a little chili competition in like Connecticut, and there's one as well there. So it's been all over there. It's just a good recipe.
You have a question? Has your wall oven been fixed yet?
It will be fixed, hopefully, fingers crossed, this Friday. We had the technician out, ordered the part. Now the problem is they have to order one fuse, and if it's that fuse, great, then everything's fixed. But if it's the circuit board after the fuse, then it's another order the circuit board. But you don't want to have to order that part because that's an expensive part on top of it. And the fuse was already expensive, but it will be worth it to have it back. It's a new great oven, so it's worth a little bit of the money to bring it back because, it's practically brand new. It's 2 years old. And it's my favorite. I love it. I love it. It's one of those things where I'm like, I never had it before we did the reno, but that was one of my, like, I really want that oven. And I got it and I've loved it. And so it's been like hard to be without it because I've gotten so used to it. Why am I putting freeze? Do not put your onions in yet. Our bacon is nice and crispy. As you can see, we've got some crispy bits. There are still a couple little bits soft, but that's fine. I don't want them all kind of super crispy, but to the point where you've got a good crisp up on them for the most part. We're going to drop in our chuck meat, our chuck roast, and our diced up pork tenderloin. And these will give it, we'll sear them off in here. Normally, if I was going to be not making a stew like meat, I wouldn't dump them all in at one time. But this is a dish that I do not take my meat out. I've always done it this way, where I just cook and just keep adding things in, which is really, really nice because it makes it really easy to cook. I'm going to put this in here. And I think that's one thing that's just lovely about it is because it's really like a one-pot dish. We just keep adding in and adding in and adding in, and it just stews together. So that's what's the beauty of the chili. But I always do bacon first because it renders down, gives you that fat, so you don't need to add anything else. Then you can crisp up the rest of the chuck roast in there and the pork tenderloin. And then I add in my ground meats because if you add in your ground meats before they release off too much of a liquid, which you don't get a good sear on your meats. And then we'll add in our vegetables. And those, because they're going to be stewing, it doesn't matter quite as much whether they get a good sear off on them as long as they're getting kind of cooked and their flavor out. Okay, we'll let them kind of sit for a second here. But again, I have my big pot here so that there's a lot of surface area on the bottom for the cook, but we're going to be adding lots and lots of stuff. Now, I have managed to reduce it down. When I used to make it, it would be like up to the very top, and it was like a 50-pound thing of chili. It was ridiculous how much chili it was. And I have worked hard to slim it down over the years to make it not so much. But back in the day, if I'd make it, and I'd make it for all of my siblings and my parents, I was making it for like 15 or 20 people. Now I guess we're making it for like 10 plus people, and then I make it for my brother and my friends, so it's a little bit more. But it gets out, it gets good, it's delicious. I'm going to mince up some garlic to add in there. And one of the things that makes it also, I think, really lovely is I use fresh ingredients. And I think that just makes it a little bit brighter. It's still a very rich dish, but it's not quite as rich as if you just use like canned veggies. I think it just adds a little bit of freshness to it. There we go. So we'll mince up our garlic.
You have a question? Could you use just chuck roast?
You could definitely use chuck roast on there if you want just a nice thing on there. Again, I have changed it, used many different cuts of meat throughout the years. This is what I've landed on as my best kind of combination of meats because they all lend flavors and textures to the chili that make it really lovely. But yes, you can always, I always say all of my recipes, you can always sub in and change things out per preferences on there to kind of fit things because everybody has different flavor profiles or even access to different ingredients. There we go. We've got that. Let's give this a good stir. Looking good. Beautiful. We'll let that cook for just a second, and then we're going to add in our ground meats, and we'll let them pop in there. And you don't have to, as you're cooking here, you want to kind of cook there, but you don't have to wait till it's completely cooked because, again, this is going to be stewing and sitting over. Once you've got everything in it, it's just going to simmer until the Super Bowl. And that way you just stir it every so often, but those flavors continue to meld together. The meat gets more tender and lovely. So got a pound of ground beef, a pound of ground pork, and this is not quite a pound. This is about 8 ounces of chorizo, so about a half a pound, 9 ounces actually. Now for the chorizo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little bit of a well in the middle to put that down because I want that to kind of hit the bottom of my pan because it has a lovely, like almost like a chili oil in it. It's got a good spice to it, and this will start to kind of flavor up everything. Don't go too heavy on it. I will say in the past I've done up to a pound, but I prefer a little bit less because it has a bit of heat. And this is beef chorizo, but you can definitely use pork chorizo as well. Use these to open up those. So I'm going to break it up on here. We'll mix it around. Kind of coat it up. That's just the one I want to make sure gets really mixed around well. Beautiful. Okay, let's get these other two in here. And then we can be done with these kitchen shears. So, pound of ground beef. Now, if this is where you want to go on a lean ground beef, it works well on a chili because you're stewing it on there. I typically always just buy like the 80-20 because I'm never sure what I'm going to cook with it every week. But a leaner one does work well with chili. Get it all out there. And then we'll break these up on here and let it kind of cook. Once I kind of break it up, you don't want to stir it for a little while because if you keep stirring it, what happens is your ground meat will get into just like little tiny bits. You want it to kind of cook up and solidify in a bigger chunk so you have some of those kind of bigger chunks of ground beef in it. So we'll break it up into some smaller chunks and then we're just going to let it sit there and kind of cook a little bit to keep its form. Yeah. And beautiful. Sit that right there. And once that kind of meat is kind of cooked through, then we'll add in our garlic and our onions. kind of prep up some of my peppers to add in here. I'm going to add in just one serrano pepper for this entire thing. Otherwise, I would use about 2 jalapenos but these are a bit spicier, so a lot less. And I'm going to mince it very, very finely so you have little bits going throughout. So I don't completely avoid spices. I just use them sparingly.
Yeah, question, where can they find the recipe?
So we will post this live on our page on there, so you can always watch and recreate it with me again for it. I might have to make this a recipe card, or I'll put this in our cookbook because this is a hit one. So that's kind of, I think I'll definitely go into our cookbook. It is a favorite here. And get these out. So again, rest of these are sweet peppers, but I do have one spicy pepper. You can definitely change it up and use, add more jalapenos in, or, add habanero in, go as spicy as you want. That's something I feel like everybody should just adjust to personal preference. I know when I gave the recipe to my brother and my brother-in-law to make together, because they entered in the chili cooking contest together, they put in like these ghost peppers to make it like super, super spicy, because they entered it in the spicy chili competition, and it was like crazy. Again, I like to do all of my veggies a little bit smaller so that you're not having super huge chunks of everything in there, but everything's more similar on the same size. And we'll give our chili bowl pot a stir here in just a second. But again, always let it sit and kind of cook a little bit so that it firms up, and don't just constantly stir it on there. Otherwise, those ground meats can definitely get a little bit more smaller and not kind of nice chunks. Well, thank you, DMAC. We appreciate that. There we go. Just break that up a little bit, kind of flip it around. But right now what we have in here is our bacon, a pound of bacon, a pound of chuck roast, a pound of pork tenderloin cubed up, a pound of ground pork, a pound of ground beef, and a half a pound of beef chorizo. So good amount of meat. And then we're going to be adding in, I've got about 2½ onions here diced up, about a tablespoon of fresh garlic minced up, and then we're going to have it'll be about 1.5 cups of diced up peppers. On there. And then we'll get to our spices and some tomatoes, tomato paste on there, but we'll kind of work together, bring all those flavors in. Good little mince up, again, smaller ones. And then after we kind of get these stewing thing, that's the best part about it. And your chili is pretty much done. It's just a sit and stew. And just taste as you go, see if you need to add any more of anything. Then we'll work on our wings, our cornbread, and our dips. Because really the Super Bowl is about dips and chips and all of those delicious things. My 10-year-old daughter, she's like, I'm only here for the food and the snacks and the commercials. And I'm like, you know what? I second that. I am here for that as well. And I have that, growing up, that was like the one time a year my mom, I guess she did it like the holidays, but we never really had junk food growing up or anything like that. My mom was like, fruit is nature's candy. But the Super Bowl is when she got all of the chips, and she got cookies and a little bag of candy. And to this day, that is part of my Super Bowl spread. We have to get all of those little chips, the Doritos and Cheetos and all of that. And then, of course, I make my guac and the salsas and have that. But it's just something I've always had, and I never let go. It's just too good. I know Torrin was very, very excited. He came down and he was like, So many chips, so many chips. And as I say, I tell you, I get all of them, every single one. They're very, very, very excited. Very, very excited. And they're always like, the next thing is they're like, they know we're not going to eat it all. So that means they're like, I get to have chips for this whole week. It's like they're winning.
Are you having anyone over for Super Bowl?
Yes, so I'll have my parents over. So there'll be 9 of us tonight. But I always, for this, I make extra to give to my brother and to my friend to send home with them, because this is something they request every single year. There we go. Our meat is almost there. Again, in here, we've got a pound of our bacon that we cooked up. Then we added in a pound of chuck roast and a pound of pork tenderloin. Let those kind of sear up and cook. And then we have in half a pound of chorizo, a pound of ground pork, and a pound of ground beef. I'm going to wash my hands now that I've cut up that serrano pepper, because I don't want to touch anything, because those can be very, very spicy if you get pepper oil or whatnot in your eye. Okay. So, teeniest, tiniest, smallest amount. Serranos are more spicy than jalapenos. So if jalapenos, I typically do 2, sometimes 3, but for this, just 1, because it's about 2 to 3 times as spicy. Let's get this here. Perfect. While we're waiting for this to kind of get to its final little cook part, I'm going to start melting my butter for my honey cornbread, because my microwave is a part of my oven wall unit, and that is kaput right now. So we're doing everything the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, is that a new apron?
It is. This is one of the ones that I got for my birthday. I've been wanting this for a while. I made for my birthday. My parents got me a apron and a mystery box, and then my kids and my husband got me an apron and a mystery box. So I got to open those up. So I got a lot of new aprons for my birthday, and I got my cool alligator mitts that are somewhere around here. And I got a new washer and dryer and a new vac. These are all things I asked for. I know it's crazy, but that's what makes me happy on there. So it's fun. I was like excited, very cool. Got pretty much everything I wanted on my list. So I was excited. And looks like we are pretty much cooked up with our meat. You can see we've got those nice individual chunks of the beef and the pork and whatnot. Again, that's why you want to let it sit and kind of cook for a second before stirring too much. Otherwise, it gets to be more like you have little bits everywhere. Let's add in our onions. We're going to let our onions sit for a minute. We'll stir them in, let them kind of heat up. Already smells so delicious. But it's crazy if you look at it and how much of a red color, and that is just from a half pound of chorizo. Chorizo really gives a wonderful spice to it. It's very strong, so a little bit goes a long way, and this is a big batch of chili, and I only used a half pound. So you could just imagine how much how much flavor it is if it can already color all of that meat there for it. All right, we're going to let those onions sit for just a second, because my belief is onions always need a little bit of time just on their own. But let's get our tomatoes kind of prepped up and ready to go into our chili as well, because I like to use fresh tomatoes. Now, this is something that you can easily sub out and use like diced tomatoes work really well for this as well. Fresh, I just think, adds in just a nice little bit of happiness. We'll do pop up one more. There we go. Just going to cut off that top on here. And then we'll dice them up for it. You don't have to go as small as a salsa. Just, you don't want to have any big pieces where you have a big piece of the tomato skin, because the rest of it will kind of shrink down, let their juices out, but the tomato skin will kind of stay intact. So Just dice those up into nice smaller pieces. Now we'll make a homemade salsa here in just a second, and there I'll cut my tomatoes up a little bit smaller for it. There. On there. Let me give this again a nice stir. Gonna mix around. I'm gonna, now that we've got a bit in there, I'm gonna turn it down to about a 6. While I was cooking the meat, I had it up nice and high to keep it sear. As you can see, a lot of those juices from the mix or the meat are kind of or steaming out. You don't want to leave too much of that. You want the flavor to stay down, but leave a little bit less of the liquid. We're gonna add in our garlic, about a tablespoon of fresh garlic, and then our peppers. In there we have our bell peppers, sweet peppers, and 1 serrano pepper. We'll add this in here, and we are going to mix that in here. Give it a good mix around. Let it get a bit of that heat. Okay. And let's get the rest of these tomatoes diced up and in there. Looks, I'm going to take my butter off here because it's almost melted, and I don't want it to get too hot because I want it to be cool enough for making my honey thing on there. So we're going to get this, let it sit over here, and then we'll get that in there. Then we're going to make our honey cornbread, and then we'll make our work on our wings and get our dips going. We've got guacamole, pico de gallo. I'm going to make my homemade French onion dip, which is one of my favorites. Then we make our classic Velveeta and Rotel, which is one of my husband's favorite dips on there. So we've got like 4 different dips going in, and then wings 4 ways.
You have a question? Can you go over the meats and the seasonings for the chili?
Yes, so right now in here we've got, I'll give it a good stir. We've got a pound of bacon that we sauteed up. Then we have a pound of pork tenderloin cubed, a pound of chuck roast cubed, 1 pound of ground pork, 1 pound of ground beef, and a ½ pound of beef chorizo. We added in about a tablespoon of garlic, of minced fresh garlic, 2½ onions, peppers, and then a serrano pepper. We'll add our spices here in just a second. The spices we'll add in when I like to cook the meat up in there, and now we're literally about to add them in just a second for it, because we want them to stew and cook the meat through, and then we'll add it, and then they simmer through it. This is my trick, and I've been doing it for years. I do add in spices, but I start with chili packs because these are way cheaper than buying all of the spices and the amount of spices you need for it. And they all have a different blend on it. And this is always what I say. Go there, grab a bunch of different chili packs, pop them in there. Don't just use one of one brand. Use a bunch of them, and then I add in a few more spices to get to it. But this is these are like 79 cents, but you really are getting like $5 worth of spices in each bag, and it cuts down what you need to do on there. So this is kind of one of those things where it's a really good saving. So I'm going to start with this is Amazon groceries chili seasoning thing. And you'll see they all have like a slightly different color, they're slightly different blend. And then I taste, and then I finish off with some of my own spices. But that's what I do. I just go through and I grab a whole bunch of different chili spices to start with to get my kind of unique blend for it. And each one of these are tailored for about a pound of meat. And we've got a lot of meat in here, plus a little bit of extra. So here's our base for it. And then we'll add in a little bit more on it. But you can see, that's what I always say. It's always really unique because each blend has a different combination of what they use in it, which can add, it adds different flavors. But I don't just stop there. We've got to add in a little bit of extra stuff to jazz it up. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of onion powder. It's going to give a nice savory note to it. I've got some ancho chili powder. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of ancho chili powder. This is pretty mild, not super spicy. Paprika, you can do smoked or regular. We're going to do about a tablespoon of that. And again, we are making a huge amount of this, and then oregano. We're going to do about a half a tablespoon of oregano. And since I like mine mild, we're going to use a little bit of black pepper. But if you like, again, a little bit more heat, you can use in some cayenne pepper. We're going to just do about a teaspoon of black pepper. And then I'll mix everything, and then I'll test my saltiness level here in a little bit. But otherwise, you have to use a lot of other spices, and you mix up. And this is just a cheaper version of it. Mix it together, coat it up. We're going to let it simmer. It's going to coat all of the meat, and it's going to sing in there. If you were to taste this right now, you'd be like, oh, that's a lot of spices. But we still haven't added our beans, our tomatoes, and they'll all stew together to give it a nice, great flavor. There. Beautiful. Okay, we're going to let that kind of heat up on its own for just a little bit, kind of simmer there, because you want that spices to hit the direct heat of the pan before we add in some of our other bases, because otherwise they get a little bit, they're not as strong in flavor. So we'll let those chill out there, and then while we're doing that frizzing, I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse, and we'll work on our cornbread so that can bake up, so that we can be ready before we do our wings. I know I had to rethink my order of doing things when my wall oven went out, because I was like, oh, I do my wings over there, I could do my cornbread now. I'm like, cornbread, it can sit. We'll do it over here. That's not a big deal. And we'll just get it in before. Let me grab some bowls here. This is our kind of my classic, everyone's favorite cornbread, the honey butter. All my kids were like, you're making the cornbread. And I'm like, I'm making a cornbread. And then Torrin's like, and you're making the wings. And I'm like, we're making the wings. You don't have to worry. We're going to have it all, rest assured on here. So we've got our butter in here. Remember, we needed a half a stick of melted butter. Now we're going to keep this pot because we're going to melt some more, because we're going to brush when everything's baked up with honey butter. So we'll melt some more butter for that. Grab a spoon out. Get all of this. So a half a cup of melted butter here. And then we are going to add in 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk. Because we're making this, I actually bought some buttermilk. But if you don't have buttermilk at home, just do a mixture of half milk, half cream, with a half of a lemon juice squeezed over it. That I find is my perfect kind of go-to. Which this side to open. But I need 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk here. So we've got 1. And then we're going to do a 1/4 cup more on here. So into our butter. We're going to work on our wet base, and then we'll add in our honey and our sugar. I'm just going to pop this into the fridge now that we're done with it. And mix that butter into that buttermilk. And then we're going to use 2 eggs, but let me first give this chili a nice mix. Beautiful. I'm going to turn it down now to about a 3 now that we're getting into the stewing age. I'm going to add in some tomato paste and then our diced tomatoes. I might add in a few more diced tomatoes, but I like to see how much it sweats out first before. But we're going to use in a nice big heaping spoonful of tomato paste. This is going to give you a nice kind of tomatoey flavor to it without adding a lot of liquid into the base of your chili. So let's mix that in. Let's get our tomatoes in here, the juice and everything in there as well. All right, it was about 5 tomatoes diced up, and I may add a few more on there, but I want to get started with a little bit in, let it simmer. Yeah, I think we'll add, I set out 8, but I think we'll definitely add them in. Get those first bits simmering here. Let's add some more. Let's get these rest of these tomatoes diced up and in there. I bought lots of tomatoes for today because I'm going to make some homemade pico, and that needs a lot of tomatoes. So you can use vine ripe or plum tomatoes. Those both work really well for this. Or just, again, you can use diced tomatoes. If I use diced, I haven't done it before. I've used about 2 kind of those 28-ounce cans, so the really big fat ones work for this because it is such a big recipe.
You have a question. Do you put any beans in your chili?
I do. I have beans. They're going to come in. I do. I have, and I use a wide variety of beans in it. So we'll add those in just a second, but I add those in towards the end because if you do a lot of stirring with beans, since they are canned, you can stir too much and they get more mushy. So once we've got the base of our soup, we add the beans in for them to stew after it. But right now, when it's thicker and beans are more delicate, I would just wait. Now, if you're going to the difference is if you do soak your beans and you're using like the dried beans from those can put them in because those need a long time to get soft, and you typically have to soak them overnight before you're ready to cook them up. But those hold together a little bit better than canned beans. So we add that in. Looking good. Beautiful. So let that simmer for a little bit. And then we'll get our beans in, but I just want those tomatoes to kind of seep out their juices for a little bit. Okay, let's finish up with our cornbread so that can get bacon. Let me grab my eggs. I've got my corn flour, sugar. But yes, I've got my stack of beans over here. Now, that is where I feel like, depending on what beans you like, how many beans you like, you can go more or less. My family has very different opinions. Some are like, no beans. Some are like, oh, my mom's like, more beans, more beans. Other ones, less beans, less beans. I tend to do, like half and half for the most part, like, 1 can per pound of beans, give or take for it. Okay, let's get that serrano pepper I cut up. I can feel it burning on my hands. That's how spicy they are. Let's do into our base here. Let's first add our 2 eggs in here. So right now we have 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk with a 1/2 cup of melted butter. And this is going to be for our honey cornbread. We'll add our next one in. We'll give this a nice little pop, mix those in. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of honey and then 2/3 cup of sugar. Now, the honey in this is going to give our cornbread a lovely kind of golden brown color to it, and a little bit of the honey flavor. Most of the honey flavor is going to come afterwards, and the honey butter we brush over it. And this is my kids' favorite cornbread. It's a nice sweet one for it. So about 2 tablespoons. So that's 1 and 2. And then we'll add in 2/3 cup of sugar. Give this a good mix. Get that honey in there mixed up. And then we're going to add in our baking soda and our salt. We'll just use a half a teaspoon of each of those. And then we'll add in a cup of flour and a cup of cornmeal. Now you always want to use, for cornbread, yellow cornmeal works a little bit better than white cornmeal. It's a little bit sweeter, so it's kind of my preferred. And I always say that I never knew white cornmeal kind of existed until I think my mom was making cornbread in middle school, and she sent my stepdad out to pick up some groceries, and that was like, oh, grab some cornmeal. And he came home with white cornmeal, and we're like, what is this? And I did not make a very good cornbread. That's a teaspoon. We need a half a teaspoon. So a half a teaspoon of salt, and then a half a teaspoon of baking soda. You don't need very much in here because the eggs will kind of help with that. Give this a good mix. And there we go. And then we're going to add in our cornmeal and our flour. So let's do our cornmeal. I'm going to do 1 cup of that. Let's see how much this gets me if I need to use. Oh, it's going to give me a perfect cup. I'll do, got like a little sprinkle left, but might as well use it. Always nice when they turn out exactly at the very end. And then 1 cup of flour. And we're just using all-purpose flour here. And we'll kind of dust that off. Let's see. Should be good. Make sure there's no pockets. And what you want to do, because this is a butter batter base, you want to make sure you don't over mix it, because that will lead you with a denser corn muffin versus a nice light and fluffy one. So we're going to mix it around until it's just combined, and then we will have this, spoon it up in there and have it bake off, and then we're going to prep up our wings to get ready to go into the oven, and then it's our dip time while those are working. So just until it's barely mixed, it's going to be a little bit chunky, just like this. I think we're good. And again, resist the urge to mix it until it's smooth. Let me grab this, and let me grab my oil. Put it in here. There it is. We're going to give this a little spray down and put it in here. Make sure you can do these in in muffin pans as well. My kids really love the mini loaves. So we'll have them in here. And then when we'll bake these at 350 for about 22 minutes, and then we brush them with honey butter twice. When they first come out, like a minute or two after they first come out, and then a few minutes later, because that first batch kind of seeps into the bread, and the second one gives it a nice little top to it. I'm going to add a nice little scoop into each one, and then I'll kind of come back over and fill it up, you know, and even it out. I always just like to kind of go a little by little, and then down there, so you're not overfilling one and then have to borrow from it later. But these, again, these are just like a lovely sweet cornbread. They're very moist and delicious. They're my kids' favorite, and I think it's that honey butter, that honey in there, and then that honey butter on top. They're so yummy. But the honey, these won't be like a bright yellow cornbread. They're going to be a golden brown, because the honey, when you bake with honey, it breaks up brown. So it will give a darker color to it, but will be delicious. Go through, kind of spoon this in. And then we'll get these in the oven baking. We'll see who is going to fight over these.
Brenda sent you a gift.
Well, thank you, Brenda. We appreciate that. I don't know. You're going to have to fight your kids for them. A lot of times my mom, she's really good when she knows that certain people love it. So she'll just take a little bit of one, and my kids show no mercy. They're like, well, I'll eat the rest of yours then. But she always does it because she knows that they like it more on there. And I'm like, I always could make a bigger batch, but I want them to eat other things because they would just eat cornbread, all cornbread every single day. Here we go. Except Evie. Not Evie. She's my picky one. She does not like cornbread, and I think it's so strange. Well, correction. She'll eat the honey butter top off of the cornbread, but won't eat the rest. And I'm like, so you'll eat the honey part. Let me clean this up here. Because that way it will be a little bit easier to bake up if or clean up later. Just take a little paper towel, anything that you dripped off, that way it doesn't bake on and make yourself more work later. Now these are just going to go into the oven at 350 degrees for about 22 minutes. I'll slide them in here. So 22 minutes at 436. They will be ready to come out.
Linda, since you get.
Well, thank you, Linda. We appreciate that. I'm going to set my timer here because we're kind of busy. This is not my favorite timer, but we'll get it working. It's fine as long as I don't have to set multiple timers. Set multiple timers, then I'm a goner, guys. Okay, look at our chili. It's going there. It is beautiful. Perfect. Now we're going to add in our canned beans because we're pretty much done with the chili part, and let's get onto the wings, but we'll get those so that can all stew. Now with our beans, you want to make sure you rinse them when you put them in, because this like starchy water that the beans are in will just make you a gooey, sloppy mess. Now, the one bean that I guess you could go without rinsing are the black beans because they're a little bit different, but these aren't seasoned black beans. If you buy the seasoned one, you could pour that in there, but I did not buy the seasoned one, so I don't have to rinse it. Run these over here. Thankfully, all of these beans are pull tabs. I always tell you my can opener skills are less than stellar. Although it's funny, when we were kids, when we first moved to Tennessee, we didn't have all of our stuff because our house wasn't built and we were staying in like a house. And we had got all of these things to have, and one of them were like canned foods, like Chef Boyardee canned ravioli as a kid to have after school or whatnot. But we had no can opener. And my siblings and I got very, very creative with butter knives on how to open up a can with a butter knife. They weren't pretty, but we did that. It was like the one time my mom bought like processed food for us growing up. We never had like that stuff, but since we were living, we didn't have all of our stuff because our house wasn't being built. We got like all of this stuff that we never got, and we thought it was so special and so cool. Okay, that was our kidney beans, our black beans. These are our cannellini beans, which are white kidney beans. And then we're going to add in some pinto beans. So I like to use a good mixture of beans in my chili because I find that each bean gives a different texture and a slightly different flavor, and they work really well. I don't love just straight up kidney beans, which typically are the most common form of beans in chili, but I do like a little bit of a kidney bean. So we put them in there. Sometimes I'll use light and dark kidney beans. Sometimes I'll add in red beans. It just depends on what beans I grabbed at the store or have in my pantry. So we've got in our beans right here, a good amount. We're going to give these a good mix in. You know what? I think I'm done with these tongs, so I'm going to grab to a spatula here or to give them a nice stir. And then we'll mix them in. Beautiful. But I love the mixture of them and not just relying on the basic light and dark kidney beans or the pinto beans, but having a wide variety really makes it nicer.
You have a question? What kind of cake do you have in your cake dish?
So that was a cake I made up the other day for Evie's birthday party. I'll pull it out here. It is just a homemade vanilla kind of butter cake with homemade vanilla and buttercream frosting, but look how pretty it was in there. We had this for her like little birthday party on there. We made also the Aunt Aggies. We're down to like 3 Aunt Aggies that are sitting in there, and I think the kids are too afraid to eat the last ones because they don't want to be blamed for taking the last of the cookies. So they've been sitting there, and then we had pink Rice Krispie treats on there for her little party. Apparently, Evie said all of her friends really love the Aunt Aggie's cookies. So I was like, that was delicious. And then in the morning, they woke up early at like 5 in the morning and were eating Rice Krispie treats. Look at this gorgeous, delicious chili.
Do you add any tomato sauce to this?
So I had tomato paste, and we added in about 8 fresh diced tomatoes. Depending on, I'll look how quick, I might add in a few more diced tomatoes, but I'm going to let it simmer, let those natural juices come out, because if you add too many tomatoes in there, it's going to get too liquidy. And so I always let them sit and simmer. If I need to add more, I'll add some more in there as we go. But we've got those cooking. Let's get our wings ready, because we're going to do wings in a couple of different ways, and then we can work on kind of prepping up some of our other stuff. So let me give this area. Oh, I forgot to add this tomato in. I cut it, but I forgot to dice it up. Grab that in there real quick. But you can definitely use, so I like to use fresh tomatoes because I think it just makes it a little bit brighter, a little bit happier. But you can definitely use canned tomatoes. Canned diced tomatoes work really well for this.
Do you post your recipes anywhere?
We do post all of our lives, so everyone's able to watch and recreate from just watching along again. And then I am working on a cookbook right now for this. And I think I'm going to put my chili recipe in there because it is such a delicious recipe in there. And then for our members, a couple times a week, we do send, or a month, we send out recipe cards for them, kind of working on our next batch of recipe cards as well. So lots of different ways, but again, everybody is always able to rewatch our lives and kind of recreate everything. And I do make sure I go through every, amount that I use so that they have that able to recreate from that. Okay, let's slide these guys. I'm gonna make a little bit of space to kind of clean up for our chicken. Let me wipe this off, that tomato juice.
And what's the timeline for your
I'm hoping by the end of March, if everything kind of getting it in there. I've got the formatting done. We're inputting in recipes and seeing what areas we need to add more in. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so.
And have you thought about adding a QR to the pages? The link back to videos?
Yes, actually we have. My husband said, oh, that would be so awesome because we have all of those videos, and that way you could always see a live demonstration of it, because sometimes if you've never made something or you're unsure, it's nice to have a video to walk through. Okay, we have lots and lots of wings here, and we're going to do a couple different varieties of wings for this. Let me get our sauce going for our La Brea tar pit wings, which is delicious, and it kind of gets its name from the La Brea tar pits because the sauce base of it looks kind of like a tar, but it's like a sticky teriyaki wing. And it's delicious. You're going to use soy sauce, red wine, sugar, ginger, and garlic. I have my ginger paste is right there. Let me grab my sugar. We're going to kind of let it cook and dissolve, and then we'll pour that over the wings, and we'll let those start cooking first because those take a long time, because as it heats in the oven, it recreates kind of like a reduction that turns into a nice sticky sauce. But so good. So we're going to start with a cup of soy sauce. Which I'm going to say is probably going to be around the rest of this bottle. This is one of the few recipes I use soy sauce because I've kind of subbed out my soy sauce for Japanese barbecue sauce on almost everything. Okay, we'll do 3/4 cup. We'll have more than enough with that. So I'm going to do 3/4 of a cup and then 3/4 of a cup of red wine. That way I save a little bit of soy sauce in case I need it. And then, see if this is a twist off. No. I gotta open this up. There's a corkscrew there. And then you can use a cooking wine or just any red wine that you have lying away. We'll be cooking it off in the pan, so it will reduce down and cook all the alcohol content out, but it will leave a really lovely flavor behind for it. Here we go. Pop this out and get it on here. And we're going to do so equal parts soy sauce and red wine. So I'll do 3/4 of a cup of this. I'm going to add that in there. Set this to the side. And then we're going to add in some sugar, some ginger paste, and some minced up garlic. And we're going to let that simmer on here. I'm going to add in, it's going to seem like a crazy amount of sugar, but we're going to use 1.5 cups of sugar. So you essentially need whatever your liquid content is, you need that equal in sugar because it's going to make a sticky sauce. So you're not going to be eating all of it, but it's got to make a nice sauce on there to stick to not the ribs, but to the wings on there and kind of get those lovely flavors going through. I'm going to turn on my back burner and we're going to get that heating up to dissolve into it. And I will say you do have a little extra sauce on there, but you need to have enough to coat the bottom of your pan. So you have to have more than enough on there. Now I'm going to use ginger paste, but you can use ginger powder. If you're going to use like ginger powder, dried ginger, you're going to need like a teaspoon. If you're using ginger paste, you can use a little bit more. You can use up to a tablespoon. So we're going to use up the last of, you know what? I think I had about a tablespoon left in there, so I don't need my other one. And that's just because dried ginger is a bit stronger. It has more of a zing to it than ginger paste. And you can always also mince up fresh ginger as well. With fresh ginger, I will say some ginger is more spicy than others. And if you do have a really spicy one, you're going to use less. And if it's more mild, use more. Just taste it. I will say that's like one of those things that I learned when I like juice. That ginger root is not all the same.
Can you go over everything for the sauce so far?
So yes, I have 3/4 of a cup of soy sauce, 3/4 of a cup of red wine, 1.5 cups of sugar, about a tablespoon of ginger and ginger paste, and then we're going to add in about a tablespoon of minced up garlic. We're going to let that simmer, and then we will pour that over our chicken wings that we'll put in the oven, and we're going to let cook. And essentially, it's going to reduce down into a sticky type tar that will coat up the wings, and it will be delicious. This was a recipe that was like featured, and I want to say like the Gourmet Cookbook, or maybe it was Gourmet Cooking Magazine a long, long time ago. Been making this for over a decade, and I've kind of changed it a little bit. I had a little bit more sugar and a little bit more ginger and garlic to get that right kind of flavor and sticky consistency, but so good. Here we go. We'll add this in here. And it's really important to get this to a nice boil and simmer beforehand because the oven will do some of the reducing in there, but it can't do enough because you don't want to have to cook your wings forever in the oven to where they get overcooked. Give this a good stir. I'm going to give our chili a nice stir. And I have my chili nice and low right here. I'm in it because it's just that simmer time where we're going to stir it every so often. I think I'll add a little bit more tomatoes in just a little bit because I like to have it a little bit wetter. But again, you just never know how much fresh tomatoes are going to add in there. But we'll get that going in a little bit. Let's get our wings here since we've got quite a bit to prep up. I'm going to grab a big bowl and get these all over here for them. So we've got lots and lots of different wings on here. And deciding whether I want to take the extra time to clip off the little wingette part or just leave them. Growing up, we always left the little wingette part, that teeny part, onto it, but I might clip them off. We'll see. My husband really, but I would say they love it when I clip them all into multiple parts. My stepdad does too, where you get them into these like things so they have lots of little tasty bits for it. But we're gonna get these in here. And we can kind of spread them out between my 4 trays. I've got lots of, let's see, I've got about 15 pounds of wings here. Even though I took these out of my fridge out there, they're still a little cold and toasty. Okay, this is all I'm gonna be able to fit into this bowl. So we'll move these here and I'm gonna get these into my trays while we have it. Let me see, wash my hands real quick. We'll do a clip off. I'll do the basic clip as I set them because that will be nice. Makes it a little bit easier to eat. But you don't have to, like, you can always buy the, the drumettes and the wingettes that are already separated, but it's really, really easy to just take your kitchen shears and then just cut through and remove this tip. And then we're going to place them. And I got one more pack over there, but once I get through this bowl, then we'll kind of get to the rest of it. You just clip in there. If you want to separate it into the wingettes to the next part, what you're going to do is you would then cut right down here. But we're preparing a lot of wings today, so we're going to keep it a little bit more simple here. Just get a good pair of kitchen shears and kind of cut through it. This is why I own so many kitchen shears. And we'll get these guys ready to cook up. We're going to do our La Brea tar pit wings first because they need to steam and cook up a little bit longer than the other ones. And I will say my little trick here to make cleanup a lot easier is I'm going to be cooking them in aluminum trays versus on my baking sheet. I'm going to put my baking sheet under there for support, but this means that all of that oil and fat from the chicken and the sauces can just be thrown away. Make it easier on yourself, not harder. I used to do aluminum foil, where you cover it, but it always would seep through underneath. And so it's just easier to do it this way. And then we've got our chili, and then we've got to make our dips. And it looks like we got 5 minutes left on our cornbread, which is perfect because these should be about ready to go in there. And then it's dip time. Let's get these. We've got our first kind of tray set down. Doing it like this also allows you to make 4 different types of wings or multiple types, because everybody loves to have lots of different flavors. So today we're gonna do our La Brea tar pit wings. We're gonna do our Lowry's wings, which is they're the simplest wings on earth, but they're nothing bougie or special about them. But my boy, I was gonna say, Torin and my stepdad. They're my stepdad's original wings. That's what he used to make us on Halloween every year, was Lowry's seasoned chicken wings and wild rice and broccoli. That was like his thing, or his Halloween dinner he made for the family every year, because Halloween is his favorite holiday. And he used to make that. And this is kind of, the Lowry's wings are kind of his version of the wings, but they're very simple. But the boys, they love them. And then I'm going to do a ranch wing and then a kind of a garlic parmesan wing on there. But those will cook up a little bit longer, or a little bit faster. So we'll do these ones first. And that way we'll have different little sets and trays for it. And that's a nice thing. So we've got our chili. It's simmering over here. The beauty of the chili Super Bowl thing is this can just sit and simmer all day long. Like, you can make it in the morning. There's been times where I've made it in the morning and I've had it just simmering on low all day, because chili is one of those foods that just tastes better the next day. Okay. Got round these. We're almost through this first set. Pop these guys in. And I got one more pack over there. I just couldn't fit them all in my bowl. Slide these guys. I always put them kind of face up. Now with the La Brea Tarbits, we will actually be doing flips on them to season them up. So we'll flip them twice. So you start on the top, then you flip them, and then you end on the top. These guys going. And then our sauce for our La Brea Tar Pits is starting to simmer up. You want to bring it to a nice boil. In there we've got soy sauce, our red wine, our garlic, and our sugar, and our ginger paste. So that should be almost all ready to go there. Okay, we've got this first one down. We got those wingettes. Put that right here. Let me give my hands a quick rinse. I'm going to spread these out. I'm going to put some over here. Since I told you we're having lots of wings. I'll even them out once we get there, but let's get our last pack in. I will always say, when I'm prepping for the Super Bowl, I make sure I go to the store and get wings earlier in the week, because if you wait too long, they are all sold out, or they're like, they jack up the prices. So you just have to go a little bit earlier. Like I get them on like a, the Wednesday before, so I have them there and ready.
Do you have a team you're cheering on tonight?
No, not really. My team that I've cheered and gone on and supported my entire life are the Minnesota Vikings. And yeah, they've out of my lifetime, they've never really gone that far. I do remember one year where they were close to the Super Bowl, and I remember the Rams. Yes, the Rams beat them out, wasn't it? The Rams?
No, I don't think it was the Rams. Or through the interception.
Oh yeah, it was before that, but there was one in the 90s. Whoop. This is where I say got it. My eyes off it for a second. Gotta watch it for a second. No worries. We're gonna bring that over and let it simmer down. That's when we know it's like candy making. You've got your sauce going for it on it. But yeah, they've been close every year. It's like, it's gonna be their year. It's gonna be their year. And it's not their year. Let me get that cleaned up in just a second. Let me finish this off and then I'll wipe everything down. But it's not their year this year. I thought we had a good team, just couldn't pull it together. Injuries and whatnot. But one of these days, they've never won a Super Bowl, so they've got to eventually win it once. Get these. And then we'll get that spill over. Few more left, and then I'm going to just fill in. Again, when you do your wings, you kind of want to make sure that they're not overcrowded in there, that you have just enough space on each one. So don't stack any on top of each other. I think I have room for it there for one more.
Can you go over the types of wings you're making?
So we are going to make our La Brea Tar Pit wings, which are in like a kind of like a soy sauce based thing. And then we are going to make our Lowry season wings, our garlic Parmesan wings, and some zesty ranch wings. So lots of delicious wings. Let me kind this over here. I'm going to grab my cornbread out here in just a second. But I'm going to grab this off because we're making candy here. There we go. Perfect. That's always that. Got to keep your eye on it. Okay. Let me grab my alligator mitts. I hear you, timer. Beautiful. I'm going to slide out this honey cornbread here. We'll melt up our honey and our butter together to brush over it, but this is looking gorgeous. Look at our beautiful honey cornbread. So our base of this, it's got our butter base to it. We used a cup of cornmeal, a cup of flour, sugar, honey in it. But what makes this really the most unique and the best flavor is the fact that we are going to brush it with honey butter twice. So the honey butter that goes over this, we're going to start with a fourth a cup of melted butter with 2 tablespoons of honey. That is where you're going to get all of your honey flavor. So we do put some in it, but it's not quite as strong of a honey flavor. This is where it's going to come in.
You have a question? Could you use the chicken tips to make it soft?
You definitely could use the chicken tips on there for the stock. You're going to probably want, some other kind of fattier meats on it, but it definitely could add to it though. This would probably make a good smaller batch of stock with it, but there isn't a whole lot of fat on it or a lot of skin, but it definitely could be reused. And I'm all for reusing and anything you can. Okay, we're going to melt that up, then we'll add our fourth cup. Let's get our La Brea tar pit ones. Let's see which one I want to use. I'm going to do this guy over here with the La Brea tar pits. So we've got our sauce here, and we're going to pour it over all of them. And this is going to continue to reduce down in the oven, and it will turn into like a sticky tar base on it. And we're going to do this a couple flips on this. First up, then we go down, we flip it, and it kind of comes together to make that nice little base for it. So we've got that. Give them a nice little shake. This one we're going to do our Lowry season one. Let me grab my Lowry's because I left it over here. This is the most simple, basic, easiest wing ever. Anybody can do this. What we're going to do is you're going to use Lowry seasoned salt. That is all you do. This is one my son and my stepdad, they live by. They say this is like the world's greatest wings. Let's give these a good shake out. Grab a little tong here so I can kind of move these around. You want to make sure their skin's up and ready. There we go. And all we're going to do is dress these with a little bit of Lowry seasoning salt. Don't go too heavy because this is salty, but the skin will crisp up with the Lowry seasoning salt on it and gives a great flavor. My son, out of all of my wings I make, he says these are his absolute favorite. It's weird. They're very simple. There's nothing bougie or jazzy about it, but they are delicious. And then over there, we're going to get our next ones going on it. I'm going to pop these in the oven real first because they're going to start going on it and have them on the top on there. And we'll have those right underneath. These ones we're going to do a little bit differently in the fact that we are going to coat them in a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of cornstarch, a little bit of flour, and then we're going to add some seasonings on it. But we can do it right into the pan, which means we don't have to use bowls. Let me grab my oil. Got my cornstarch, which will help, and a little bit of flour helps give it a nice crispy outside to it. I'm going to turn my butter off since it's melting up nicely.
You got a question? Can you go over the first sauce that you put on the wing?
Yes. So that is my La Brea tar pits, and what we started out was about a 3/4 of a cup of soy sauce with 3/4 of a cup of red wine, 1.5 cups of sugar, and then a tablespoon of ginger paste and a tablespoon of minced up fresh garlic. You let that simmer, boil, kind of thicken up, start the sauce, pour it over it, and then we'll cook it, and we'll do 3 flips of it in there. Got my oil on here. We're going to sprinkle a little bit of, we're going to have to go in with our hands and kind of coat these up. We're going to go in with our cornstarch. You want about a tablespoon or so, 2 for each batch because there's a good amount in here. And the same thing with about a tablespoon or so of flour. The cornstarch is a little bit lighter than the flour and gives you a kind of lighter crisp, but I do like the flavor, like the crispiness of a mixture of them both. So a little bit here. There we go. A little bit there. Perfect. And then my spices. Let's go in for our ranch. The ranch, we're going to use a little bit of onion powder and ranch seasoning. So really, really simple on here. And we'll, of course, mix everything up. and a good amount of ranch seasoning. Whoop. And then we'll mix them around. We're going to do there. And I'm going to kind of coat them up, toss them in here on there. You want that flavor to get all the way around. It's going to kind of make a nice little paste on it. And then after done, we'll sprinkle a little bit more ranch seasoning at the very end, but I just want to make sure they get kind of coated up.
You have a question, what is the flour for?
It helps make a nice crispy batter on it. It's the same thing as the parch or the cornstarch. It just makes it crispier. So you get almost like a battered wing without it being, it's going to be baked up in the oven. So just gives you that extra crispiness on it. So we'll mix it around. There we go. Got those. Let me wash my hands. Okay, and now our next one is our garlic parmesan. So I've got garlic, onion powder, garlic, salt, onion powder, Italian seasoning, and then let me grab my parmesan that we will freshly grate out of the oven to add a nice little crispness to it. So let me see. There we go. We're going to add in our onion powder. A good amount adds a nice savory flavor and a good amount of crispness to it as well. Garlic salt. And then our Italian seasoning. And then I'm going to toss them. I'll wash my hands, and then we'll grate the Parmesan cheese over the top of them. We'll give them a nice coating on here. And just make sure you mix it all the way around, coat all the way around, make that oil mix up because you want it to be kind of a glistening and it mixed with that flour paste. There we go. And then set them out, skin up on these. Make sure arrange it in there, get as much, kind of fit as nicely as possible. Get my hands washed up, and then we should be good with that. Okay. Now, for our ranch ones, we're just doing an extra little coating of ranch over the top, a light dusting. And then for the Parmesan, we'll grate our freshly grated Parmesan cheese over the top of it as well to crisp up in there. You can also use, pre-shredded if you want. Here. But a good amount. And I always do it just on top because it's wasted if it goes underneath. And beautiful. Lovely. All the way around. Perfect. Now I'll pop these underneath the other ones that I have cooking up in the oven. And while I have it on 350, I'm going to turn it up to 400 because this oven does not have an air fryer setting. So we're going to do our bake at, I'll do actually 425, but then we will finish at the very end on broil on high to get that extra crisp on it. But if your oven has an air fryer or a convection bake, that works perfect for it. So here's our chili that we made in here. We started off with our bacon, then we added in diced up pork tenderloin, chuck roast, ground pork, ground beef, chorizo. We have sweet peppers, bell peppers, a serrano pepper, onions, garlic, spices, and then 4 types of beans. So we have got quite the collection here for this. Let's get some honey in our butter. Here it is. And that way we can coat our first layer of honey butter on our cornbread. And then we will, of course, finish off later. But you want it to seep in while it's hot. So we had 1/4 cup of butter, and we're going to use 2 tablespoons of honey in here. Make sure your butter is melted all the way, and then remove it from the heat because you don't want it to kind of turn into a honey candy. Mix it up just like this. And then what we're going to do is you're just going to brush this over the top of our cornbread to kind of create, and it's going, while it's hot, it's going to seep into the cornbread and give it that wonderful flavor. And then the second coating that we put on later after this has had a chance to seep in is going to give you almost like a honey, like a sticky buttery crust on the top. And it's so good. This is where all the flavor really pops in. So you're going to brush it over, and you got to do the double brushing. One brushing just doesn't give you enough, and you need to wait a little bit between coatings to give that first one a chance to really seep into the cornbread. There we go. And then we have just enough left over for a final brushing when we're done. I'll set this right over here. And let's get another batch of tomatoes in here to finish up the chili. And we can make our salsas, our guacamoles, our French onion dip. Let me give these a quick rinse. And pop these guys. So I'm going to make, for our salsa, we're going to make a pico de gallo. And then we're going to make a guacamole. And then we have our French onion dip. And then I've got to get my our little Rotel cheese dip going as well. And then we've got our charcuterie to prep up for this. So it's a snacking feast, as I like to say. And then, of course, we serve our chili with cheese, sour cream, green onions. I really like my chili with Frito scoops. So good. Let's see. I think this should be enough to go back in there. Add a little bit more. And again, just keep your chili nice and low, simmering on here. And turn it up a smidge more to about a 3. And it will just simmer, and those flavors will come together. Beautiful. Now, sometimes I will add in some corn. That I love it in there, but you can definitely add in like some frozen corn or a can of corn. So delicious. Wonderful. This is actually one of my smallest batches. I was just like, I'm going to try really hard to not make a massive, massive, massive batch. Still pretty massive. Let's get our salsas going. And our French onion dip. Okay, let me get this going for our Velveeta and Rotel. So I do the very simple one. Where did I put it here? So the Velveeta, I could not get a block of Velveeta. It was just on there, and I never really use this. This is one of my husband's favorite dips on there. So we're going to just use Velveeta cheese slices because they work. They'll actually melt up a little bit nicer on here. And then we're going to add a can of, the Rotel mix on there. But the nice thing about this is you don't have to cube up the Velveeta cheese for it. And I didn't want I was going to say, I could have gotten a huge 32, like a huge box of Velveeta cheese, but we never eat it. So I was like, I don't want to waste it. But I should have these, which will work perfectly.
Do you have a question? Do you need to add any broth or water to the chili?
No, I like it. It seeps there, and all you do, it's a nice thick chili. You just have your bases for your like tomato juice from your fresh tomatoes. So I think right now in there we have 10 whole tomatoes and the juices from that. It is a nice thick one. I don't like it. I don't want a soupy chili. I like a nice thick stew like chili on there. Just makes it really hearty and wonderful. And we're going to put this on. I'm going to have my back burner on my lowest of low settings. And I'm doing this in a Dutch oven. You could also do this in a little mini crock pot if you have it. But we're just going to do it and let it simmer and cook together. The one thing about Rotel is it has to stay on a heat source because as soon as it's gone from the heat source, it starts to thicken up this like cheese dip. That's really all cheese dip. But this does take forever though. My found plan. But the nice thing is this should melt up nicely. I'm going to put my can in between of this. I just like the good old mild chunky Rotel. Use the whole can. You don't strain it. You want that liquid in there for it. And this is just that classic. I feel like everybody eats this, you know, at the Super Bowl. It's like your classic dip that we all had growing up. Although growing up, we never did it. So my husband always did it, but we always did it. And this might be strange, but we mixed ours with cream cheese. I don't know if we always did a can of salsa and cream cheese. I don't know if that's just our family being weird, which we are a little strange on here. But I'm going to get there so we can finish up and get ready because the Super Bowl is going to be starting here in like 35 minutes, which means I feel like I got good timing. Everything's going to be prepped and ready to go here in just a little bit.
You have a question. Did you say you have a cookbook coming out soon?
I do. My plan is to hopefully end of March to have our cookbook out and ready on there. So, I mean, we do post all of our lives available for everybody to rewatch, and then our members, we send out recipe cards for them a couple times a month. But our goal here is to make our big collection, have our first cookbook, and hopefully then just have a collection of cookbooks every year, kind of add to it with our favorite kind of recipes that our family enjoys. Get that in there. And let's get this one. We'll do this one for it. And we'll just every so often, we're going to give this a nice little stir to kind of get this cheese melting. But again, you want to go low and slow with this, not too high, because with Rotel, it can scald and burn. And so you just want to make sure that your pan stays lower. Dutch ovens work out really well for this too. Okay, let's get these guys. Let's get our salsa made. And let's get our guac made. Let's put our charcuterie together so we can enjoy commercials and snacks. Because isn't that what the Super Bowl is all about? I will always sit there and I'm like, it's one of those things where I'm always like, okay, make sure, go to the bathroom during the game, take care of everything during the game, run back for the commercials.
I have a question. What kind of cheese did you add to the Rotel?
So that is just Velveeta cheese slices. I couldn't find the big block of it, so I just used the cheese slices, which are the exact same thing, but now I don't have to keep it up on there. But that classic, delicious Rotel cheese dip. Here we go. You know, it's a funny thing. I used to always make the big batch of it with like the huge block, and you could just have cheese dip for days. Okay, so we're getting our pico nice kind of chopped up smaller because I don't want to have really big chunks of it. I do like it a more chunky salsa, but you don't want to have huge pieces. So nice. We'll add this to one of our bases.
I have a question. How many steps do you have today?
Today, I did not work out today, so my weekends are down. A lot of times I take off, but I'm at 8,000 already, so I know I'll get over 10,000. Last week, I almost got to 30,000 twice. I was very, very excited, and part of me was like, "Ooh, should I just like run for something like that because I was like I was like $1,500 off, and I was like, no, I'm not that crazy, but I really wanted to. But I thought it'd be weird if I went for a run or a walk at like midnight. But when I work out, because it depends on which workout I do, they typically get me between 8 and 12,000 steps for a run, unless I go crazy and I'm like, I need to do a really long workout. Let's give this a good stir. Pat that down. We'll let that continue to simmer for this, and it kind of brings all those flavors in. Let's get our red onions going there, and we'll have got our honey cornbread. We did our first coating of our honey butter on it. We'll do our second coating in a little bit. We want that first coating to seep in there. But you know, cornbread and chili, like, you got to have those. Let's get these nice little mince up. So we're going to do red onions, and then I'll have some sweet peppers. I keep my pico very, very mild, so I won't add any spicy peppers to it, but you could definitely add in a jalapeno or habanero or serrano, whatever one floats your boat. We've got about 1/4 cup of minced up red onions. And then let me grab some sweet peppers. We'll do a yellow and an orange, 2 oranges. I always like to make my peppers be different colors than the tomatoes. I prefer, again, you know, red, yellow, and orange peppers because they're not as bitter as the green peppers, but you can definitely throw in a bell pepper if you want to. Seed these guys. And get this. Nice little mince up. And then our guacamole, we'll make that next, which is a really, really simple, I almost say it's like more like an avocado smash, but it's really simple. I just use fresh avocados, fresh lime juice, and garlic salt, but everyone loves it. And I think sometimes the simplicity of it is what makes it so nice. And most of the time when I make guac, I make pico de gallo. So for anybody who loves those like kind of good chunks to it, you can just stir in a little pico de gallo if you want. But I just like that classic, you know, when you go to a Mexican restaurant, you typically get just a really simple one. That's what my kids love, and it's just delicious. Okay. Got our peppers going into our pico. And then the last 3 ingredients, we're going to add in cilantro, fresh lime juice, and a little bit of garlic salt. And that is all you need for this. Mince it up. And I don't go too crazy. I find a tablespoon should be more than enough for it. You get the hints of it, but it's not overpowering. And I leave it a mixture. You got a little bit of the big leaf, a little bit of the small. Just about juice from half a lime should work in here. Here. Perfect. And then a little bit of garlic salt. And that is all you need for a very simple but delicious pico de gallo. Let me grab a spoon. We'll give this a good mix. That fresh lime juice adds that nice little zing of acidity, works really well with the tomatoes and the pepper, kind of brings all those flavors together. And then, of course, the garlic salt adds that nice savory notes to it. But a lovely, simple, and delicious fresh salsa. Let me grab my avocados. I think I only need, and I'll grab a fork because I find that forks smash up the best avocado on here. Let's give my Rotel here a nice little stir. I have it again very, very low. It's starting to melt down at the bottom. You don't want to rush it because that's when you're going to burn it for it. And so just keeping it simple. I'm going to break it up with my little spatula and we'll let it come together. But it should be nice and ready in a little bit. Pop that there. There we go. Slow is what you want to go. Too fast and you'll burn your cheese at the bottom of your pan. Okay, before we finish that on, let's get our last coating of our honey butter on our cornbread here. So it has that nice, wonderful honey butter topping to it. So we did that first round, really seeps into it. This gives you almost like a glaze on top of your cornbread, which my kids say is their favorite part. There we go. And we'll set that over here. Let's get these guys in there. We'll mash them up. And then we are just onto our last thing. If your avocados are nice and beautifully ripe, they should just peel right off the skin like this. That's when you know they're perfect. If they stick, they're a little underripe, and you all know when an overripe avocado is there because they go from being perfect to awful in 2 seconds. Or when Jackie gets a hold of them, because I always ripen up my avocados on the counter, and then once they're ripe, I'll pop them in the fridge until I'm ready to use them. But if Jackie sees them, oh, he takes them like a little ball. I think 3 actually might do it for this. On here. Pull this off. 1 more. No, 1/2. Okay. Slide this over. Now, the trick to keeping your guacamole from going bad is use lots of fresh lime juice. So I typically for 3 avocados, I'm going to use juice from a whole lime. If the lime is not very juicy, then use another one. Like this doesn't seem like it's a very juicy lime, so I have another half that I'll use. It's a very dry lime.
No question. Where'd you learn to cook?
You know what? Just years of practice. I'm self-taught. I used to get like the fine cooking and gourmet magazines, and I used to watch shows when I was younger. But just practicing over the years and honing my skills until, I perfected a recipe or, things. And then, you build up your palate, you build up your skills, and you build up your confidence. And I think that's really what it is your confidence in the kitchen. And you can realize you can cook anything you put your mind to. Might not turn out perfect the first time, but as long as you practice, it will. So I've got my fresh lime juice in here with my garlic salt, and we're going to use a fork to mash up your avocado because it's going to give your guacamole the right texture. I find if you whip your guacamole, it's too smooth. If you use a spoon, it's too chunky. A fork gives you this perfect kind of texture. There we go. And we'll pop this guy down here. Perfect. And we'll mix that guy in. And full to the top. Beautiful. We got that ready and perfect. Beautiful. So we've got our dips here. We are getting down to the very end here. We've got 1 more dip to make. We've got our charcuterie board to assemble. I'm going to take my wings out real quick, and we're going to flip the La Brea tar pit ones. And then we will assemble up our charcuterie here, which should be pretty quick on there. And then we should have our spread. Okay. I'm going to pull this one out. And you can see our Lowry's ones are cooking up nicely. The La Brea tar pit ones, we are going to flip over, and then we will flip them 1 more time. But you want them to flip over because you want these to soak up that lovely flavor inside those juices on both sides. But you want that skin to start out crispy. Beautiful. So we'll get these guys here. Perfect. I've got them flipped. We're going to pop them in. Again, I have my oven set nice and high at 425. Beautiful. Okay, let's get this area cleaned up and we're gonna build our charcuterie and be off to the game. Slide this over here. I'm just gonna clear all of this out of the way here for this because we are done with this section. And then it's the assembly to the deliciousness. I've got my big charcuterie board, which is massive, and we'll fill it up with, I've got some cheeses, different salamis, meats, and then some nuts, and then we'll throw in some fruit because it's always nice when you have a heavy meal to kind of top it off with some different fruits.
You have a question for the wings. Do you ever need to switch the pan top to bottom?
Yes, I typically will do that kind of on that fast little one on there because the bottom one doesn't get direct on there. And then I'll rotate them around. When I do my next switch on the wings, I will move them around for that to kind of finish them off on there. But it allows that kind of the top one to crisp up and then you bring them down and you can finish them. It also depends on like which wings you're doing at which, kind of setting. I will say my preferred method is with convection bake or an air fryer. But again, my wall oven is on the fritz right now, but hopefully that will be back on here. Okay, let's get this guy up and going. So here, I told you I've got quite the charcuterie board here for this on here. So we're going to get some of our dips and everything going already on here. Here we go. You can put that out there. And let me get another cutting board out. It was wonderful. She was so happy. I was told several times that I was the best mom ever. So to me, that is a success when they tell you that you are the best mom ever for this. So I was very, very happy with it. And she was very, very happy. Let me grab out a little saute pan here so I can saute my onions up for my French onion dip. And then we'll get our rest of it kind of prepped up here for it. Okay. It's kind of like the old school 90s French onion dip, but I add in little onion strips with a little bit of butter and let them caramelize, and they're just wonderful on here. And my plan, hopefully, I have everything finished in the next 10 or so minutes because we got to get ready for the game. So let's get these guys sauteing.
How was Teddy during EB?
He was a very sad boy because he didn't understand why a bunch of 10 and 11-year-old girls didn't want him hanging out with them. We let him kind of include for a little bit of it, but he was very, very sad. And, I kind of stayed out with the girls and my husband took the boys off and kind of, let them, watch a special movie and kind of did little fun things. But it was like anytime, my husband would go for a drink or the bathroom, Teddy would run out and escape. And I was like, oh, poor boy. But he just, it's hard. He's at an age like, why can't I be there with them? Why don't they? I was like, oh, they want to have their home time. Although I will say some of the kids, in the beginning, they're like, oh, they're so cute. And so they got, fawned on for a little while. Okay, we're going to let those kind of crisp up and bring their flavors in. Let's get our charcuterie going here. I've got some summer sausage, which is one of our family's favorites to kind of go on a charcuterie for it. So we're going to get a nice slit down. We'll slice it up. We'll place it on here. The nice thing about a charcuterie is they're really simple. They're pretty to make. But I do find that there has to be one of the last things you put together because the meat and cheeses, if you prep them too early, even if you cover them with plastic wrap, they don't hold up well. They dry out. So always prep them right before you're about to serve them. But it's kind of nice with the wings and the chicken or the chili. You know what I mean? Those are all things that you can be sitting and doing, you know what I mean? They can be sitting and cooking right now. So you don't need them to be actively working on them. Okay. So I've got my whole little charcuterie board here. We're just gonna take little spots here all around. We'll fill them in as we go. Just nice little spots. I always find it's pretty to kind of break up the color of things. So we've got our first round. Here's for the cameraman if he needs a little bit. I'm gonna grab my next sets of cheeses and meats that I have here. Perfect. And then we'll fill out with some fresh fruit on there. So I've got some ham. We'll cube up real quick, slice it on there, and go there. I like to get, thicker slices because who doesn't like a nice kind of thicker chunk of ham on it versus if you get like sandwich meats. You don't need a whole lot because you can get a little out of a lot for it. Here.
Where'd you get the board?
This is actually, it's my stove cover that flips over to a cutting board. So I got it on Amazon. I do have it in my Amazon storefront, but I love it because it's a multi-faceted board because you have it as a stove cover and it's a cutting board on the top, although it's too pretty to cut on. And then I use it as a, when I'm doing my really big charcuteries. We'll stir our Rotel here in just a second because I can see we've got a nice little lovely boil on it, which is perfect. I told you that's why I say go low and slow. Beautiful. Getting there. Gorgeous. Turn. We're almost there. Perfect. I'm going to give my onions a quick toss here. And we're going to get these nice and caramelized in that butter. And then I add a splash of cream. I add my French onion soup mix and I mix it with sour cream and bam, got the most delicious French onion dip. We're going to add our ham slices throughout. Again, just try to pick little places on here. I will say the little boys love the ham on here. Perfect. Kind of toss those. And then let's get our cheese. Got a simple, mild cheddar cheese, simplicity on there. And then I've got a Dubliner. And then we have a mango habanero Gouda on here. So we're going to get these sliced up. We'll add our crackers out. Kind of get everything going here. Get this nice and done. And we'll have it, and soon we'll have everything kind of cooked up here. So lots of little pretty places. And again, you don't need a whole lot because we have lots of other things kind of going for it. And eventually later I'll make the full setup, the full spread after I kind of clean up here in a little bit and do a little short walkthrough of it for it.
You have a question. What's the difference between the Dubliner cheese and cheddar?
Dubliner is very similar to a cheddar cheese, but it's a bit sharper. It's creamy and sharp at the same time. So it's an Irish. I think it is a very sharp cheese. If you see it, it's very aged on there. It's not as creamy as a mild one. My husband.
It's more creamy, less sharp.
Does he want to refresh his memory of a Dubliner?
More creamy, less sharp.
Okay, it is a creamy but sharper one. So it is sharper than a mild cheddar. But it's creamy because it's like Irish butter. Irish cream has a higher fat content in it, so you get this nice kind of creaminess to it. I will say it is really nice to use on charcuteries because, really sharp cheddar tends to crumble when you cut. This one cuts a bit nicer.
Because it's not sharp.
Somebody's going to lose their ability to eat my charcuterie. You agree with the chef, right? It's sharp.
It's super sharp.
That's right. Here we go. We knew we could come around. Sometimes he just needs to be reminded. Sharp. Nobody in their right mind would not say it wasn't sharp. But he's a little crazy. Okay, let's get this mixed in here. Let's get our onions nice, and we're getting this nice little caramelization on them for this. There we go. We're going to get our cheese there. Perfect. Nice ooey gooey on it. Okay. And I'm going to grab some of my crackers that I have set out. We'll do our nuts, then we'll throw our fruit on and finish up our dip. We'll get our wings finished up, but Super Bowl's coming here. So we might have to say goodbye, but I will post a short of the final spread. I'm pretty picky. I don't let everybody eat before it's finished. Here we go.
Can you go over what's all in the chili?
So in the chili, yes. So this is my famous chili. And you start out with a pound of bacon that you saute up. Then I add in ground or chuck roast, diced up pork tenderloin, ground pork, ground beef, ground chorizo. We saute all of that up. Then we add in our tomatoes, peppers, onions, garlic, our spices, and then we add in lots of beans. I got 4 types of beans in here: black beans, kidney beans, chili, or pinto beans, and some cannellini beans. Got our crackers going on here for this. There we go. I know I forgot they always do football shaped ones, and I forgot to get the football shaped ones out this year. Always next year. Here we go. Give this a nice little stir. Want to get this nice caramelization. You want a kind of a golden brown color to it. So we're almost there. I've got our, you can see our lovely thing. It's almost perfect. Beautiful. On there. And on here. Okay. Well, I've got about 5 more minutes, and then we'll say goodbye, but we will put our short out here of it because I've got guests coming here, but I'm hoping to get most of this done before they get here. For our French onion dip, we're going to use a packet of the good old classic 90s Lipton French onion soup dip. This is key to making the best French onion dip. But you got to have your caramelized onions, a little bit of cream, your sour cream, and you'll mix them up together. And that just is like a really delicious base to it for it. Let me grab some of my fruit here to put on our tray while we're waiting for that to kind of heat up. I grabbed some cherries, strawberries, raspberries, and grapes because a charcuterie is not perfect without our pop of color here. And you can do and have that kind of pop on here for this. So let's give this a quick rinse. And see if we can kind of get the last of it for it. But we'll add in a little bit of cherries here. Some cherries here. Just when you're doing it, you fill all the way around on each one. I'm going to put a little bit over here. Our strawberries will kind of pop off on each one. I'm going to give them a quick rinse. For this. And we can get our fruit on. I always like to cut off the things because if I leave these on, my kids leave so much of the strawberry here. Let's see. Add our little bit of strawberry slices. Beautiful. on here. Oh, got 2 minutes. And then we'll have to get ready for the Super Bowl. There. And we'll slide this guy out. A few more strawberries here and there on it. Let's slide this guy. We'll do that right there. We'll slide him over a little bit.
You got a comment that Jack's gonna have a field day with that board.
Oh yeah, he's a little bit stressful when he comes to this. I'm not gonna lie, because I don't know if I told you guys was it our Christmas or our New Year's one? He doesn't quite have the charcuterie etiquette, and he kept putting it in his mouth and eating them and then putting them back on the board. So hopefully he's learned a little bit for this.
And for the cheese dip, is it diced tomatoes in it?
Yeah, so it's actually a can of like the mild Rotel dip in there that you mix in. Okay, well, I've got my guests here, so I'm going to have to sign off, but we will post a short of everything once it's all assembled here for it. You know, Super Bowl is about to start. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made and always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it, so you can always go there and check out all the stuff we use in our kitchen as well. But again, thank you guys so much for joining us here. You don't